Springboks and All Blacks have rounded out the day's games with a 23-13 victory to the All Blacks over the Boks in Pool B. So this is advantage All Blacks in terms of securing that top spot. In all likelihood, their record of no losses at the pool stages is going to continue. And this potentially, we've still got to see what happens in Pool A, but this potentially leaves South Africa having to face Ireland in quarterfinals. But we'll get to that. Let's focus on this game. Interesting game in that it had very distinct periods of dominance. It was the Springboks, then it was the All Blacks, and then it was kind of a bit more of the All Blacks, and it was back to the Springboks. So yeah, I guess that's why it's a relatively close game, and both sides will be looking at a few chances that they could have done a wee bit better. The coaches will both have things to work on, and hey, these teams could very well meet again at some point in this World Cup, particularly for that 100th game in a final would be an interesting one. But hey, that's all to come. For this game, like I said, it was intense, and you could tell that because the All Blacks did kapo pango for their haka rather than kamate. They seem to save kapo pango for the bigger games. And I mean, that's kind of a sign of respect to the Springboks that that's the one they did. I did hear the crowd, at least parts of the crowd, singing some kind of song in my feed. I'm not sure what song it was. I couldn't make it out. I'm not sure if it was South African fans singing it, like sometimes the English fans do sing like Sweet Chariot. So if you guys could identify that song, do let me know, because there were a lot of South Africans at that game. Pollard nailed a long distance penalty early, kind of set the marker for where the Springboks were at. 3-0, although I thought overall Pollard probably didn't have his best game, but that was a hell of a penalty. 4 minutes, the All Blacks, interestingly, they get a line-out throw, and rather than doing something traditional, they immediately throw it well over the whole line-out and just get Severis to try and run onto the ball, like 10 meters past where the normal line-out mark would end. He knocks it on, but that was an interesting indication that maybe the All Blacks were looking to avoid a bit of early pack-to-pack confrontation, but they certainly weren't able to avoid that Springbok defence because it was up in their faces early on. They were just like demons early, and it was just so much South African pressure on the All Blacks. The All Blacks were through loose passes everywhere, so it was very messy early, and they were a wee bit rattled, I think, the All Blacks. Also, Joe Moody got warned by the ref for his elbow, which kept dropping to the ground at scrum time. It's an issue he's been having for quite a while, not just for the All Blacks, but also in Super Rugby, so that's a slight concern for some of the other teams who've got big tight heads who can put some pressure on at scrum time. 18 minutes, Pollard has a penalty hit the post, and that's one that he would ordinarily kind of kick all day long, so it was a bit out of character for him to miss that penalty. Perhaps is the difference between getting a bonus point and not, but they did get the ball back not long after that anyway, and there was a period of play where at one point Reese was scrambling to collect the ball which had been kicked through near the goal line and also near the sideline, and he flicked it back to Beauden Barrett, which was kind of a hospital pass, bit of a difficult situation, but Bodie being Bodie was pretty cool. Despite the fact that those two Springbok guys were running at him at pace, he managed to clear the ball and got decent distance on it. So that Springbok defence was causing the All Blacks all kinds of issues early, all kinds of pressure. The ref at one point did make Damien Delendi and Aaron Smith shake hands after there was a bit of a handbags thing going on. That's kind of good to see that the ref dealt with it that way. It kind of set the marker for the game, I guess, that there was... I don't think there was any more of that for the rest of the game, so it's kind of good that it stamped out, because, you know, sometimes that niggle just builds and builds and builds, and it just gets a bit ridiculous. So that was a good marker. I mean, the ref didn't have a perfect game either, but I thought that was one good thing that he did. Mo'unga at one point makes a break. Mapimpi tackles him. There was a bit of a concern as to whether he released Mo'unga to potentially get the ball to one of the other All Blacks supporting runners to potentially go in for a try. But the ref and the TMO determined that was just a penalty. So the All Blacks got the penalty and made it 3-0, and that was all from a South African loose pass. So again, those errors, both sides will be a bit unhappy, but hey, it's the first game. 23 minutes, Bridge gets a try. It all started from a cross kick in the All Blacks' own territory. Reese made Mapimpi look pretty silly with that one. They got a quick ball to Barrett. And yeah, eventually to Bridge. He gets the last pass. So it's 10 points to 3 with that one. And then not long later, 26 minutes, Scott Barrett gets a try. Again, loose ball, ALB steps, goes through a gap, gets a line break, and he ends up offloading it to, or is passing it to Scott Barrett, who canters over. So that makes it suddenly, within the space of 6 minutes, it's 17 points to 3. And the game has just shifted from South Africa being on top to New Zealand just cutting them to bits. But they weren't able to sustain that kind of elite level attack, and things settled back down again. Mo'unga did miss a penalty on 37 minutes, and then we kind of went into half time. The All Blacks stats in the first half, run meters 248 to 98. So that kind of shows that they, I guess, were the attacking team, but the Springboks defense perhaps isn't given enough, I guess, credit. They did miss some tackles in that period where the All Blacks scored those tries. Tackling percentage was at 64%, which is really poor. The All Blacks were at 91%. But the All Blacks made more tackles with 58 to the Springboks 41. Possession and territory was slightly in favour of the Springboks, actually 60% territory for the Springboks. So they were able to kind of keep the All Blacks camped in their own half, but it's just the All Blacks broke out a couple of times and happened to score. But that's the kind of thing the All Blacks can do. They weather that storm and then they just break out. Second half, Tuipulotu comes on for Sam Cane, who doesn't end up coming back on. I think he's taken a knock to the head, which is unfortunate. And a fair few subs for the All Blacks came on at around 50 minutes. I think Dane Coles was subbed at halftime as well. But like Crotty went off, Lalala went off, Moody went off. All these guys went off about 50 minutes. Partly the conditions, I suppose. Beauden Barrett got a kick to the face, which was totally accidental, but the commentators mentioned that won't do his Instagram account any good, so I thought that was amusing, if nothing else, but those kind of things can happen in rugby. Colby, man, talk about Colby. How good was Colby in a losing team? That guy needs more game. You need 2 Colbys. I would have liked to see Nkosi. I mentioned that in my preview as well, but Colby is just amazing. He almost got a try from a kick return, but then it was like a minute later that Peter Steph du Toit ended up getting the try just at a ruck. There was nobody there defending it, and he just picked up the ball straight over the line. Schoolboy stuff from the All Blacks to miss out on that one, but that's them capitalising on an All Blacks mistake, and likewise the All Blacks kind of capitalised on some loose ball from the Springboks as well. So that's kind of where these two teams are at. If you make mistakes, the other team punishes you, and that's how it is. And at that point, the Springboks kind of kicked back into gear because they'd been so good at the start of the first half, and then the All Blacks just cracked it up a notch, and then the Springboks kind of came surging back. So it made the game have a bit of drama about it, especially then Pollard kicked a drop goal to make it 17-13, but then Mo'unga kicks a penalty to make it 20-13, and Beauden Barrett gets another one, 23-13. That's how the score finished. Unfortunately, Inyekane went off. It looks like his knee is hurt pretty badly. I hope that's not his tournament over, but it did look pretty nasty. But yeah, interestingly, the game also finished with the Springboks making an error. So it's just the errors, I think, that will really frustrate Springbok fans and also Rassie Erasmus. The All Blacks coaching staff won't be thrilled about that either, but they'll certainly be the happier of the two camps to have gotten a win. If you look at the stats, remember I said the Springboks only had like 98 run meters in that first half? By full time, it's 372. That's actually more than the All Blacks with 367, so almost even. Possession and territory, 53% Springboks and 59% Springboks, so the slightly more possession and almost 60% territory. Tackling percentage is actually almost, well, they settled a bit closer anyway. The Springboks finished with 67%, which is again poor. But the All Blacks went from that really good looking 91% at half time down to 75% by full time. And half of that's Cheslin Colby, honestly. His stats were like 11 defenders beaten. 118 run meters, 11 defenders beaten. ALB for the All Blacks had 8 and 63 run meters. So Cheslin Colby, we just need to see that guy with the ball more if you're a Springboks fan. Penalties conceded 4 to the All Blacks, 9 to the Springboks. That's a slight area of concern as well for the Springboks. Turnovers conceded 12 by the All Blacks, 18 by the Springboks. So again, it's just those kind of things that add up between these two great teams that if you make mistakes, it might cost you the game. Overall, I mean, one of these teams was going to have to finish below the other, so that's the way it's going to be. They will most likely both go on and beat Italy, so that still has to happen, and both these teams can't relax, but that is probably the toughest game out of the way for both these teams. In terms of some grey area stuff, All Blacks forward passes, maybe. Some of them looked a touch dodgy. There were a couple of tackles on Ade Savia I thought were a wee bit high, so I like to think over the course of the game that stuff evens out, but I have only watched the game once. I've just finished watching it, drank a couple of beers while watching it as well, so I'm certain there's stuff I have missed as well. The All Blacks I thought kicked pretty well, whereas I thought Faf de Klerk and Handré Pollard, they're kicking from hand, just not quite at that level we are used to seeing, but I've written a note, Colby is the man. And Colby is the man. Tackling stats, Moody had the best of the All Blacks, 10 from 10. Moster was the best Springbok with 11 tackles, but he missed 4, which is uncharacteristic for him as well. So yeah, 23-13, that's how that one finished. Both these teams, I think, will get better from this game. You can probably tell that there was a little bit of time off. The All Blacks were sharp at times, but not throughout the whole game. The Springboks defense was just menacing at times, but again, you can look at those tackle stats, not for the whole game. So, yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on this game, and I'm off to bed because it's 12 o'clock. I'll talk to you guys again soon. That's 12 midnight. Anyway, see you later.